Hey, peace to the family. I swear I'm having some. Hey, peace to the family. This is Ikemba Jore of We Charge Colonialism. This is another Black Power Blueprint session, and where we analyze and examine Dr. Amos N. Wilson's work, The Blueprint for Black Power. I have been having technical issues with my internet, so hopefully we can get through this session without any problems. And when I do these, I keep them short, around 8 to 10, and we get into an examination of the text, the blueprint for Black Power. Again, this is an important text for our community because he lays out different strategies, methods for the African community to attain power on the continent, in the diaspora. This is mostly a focus on Africans based here in the United States of America, but it's a blueprint that can be emulated wherever African people are. So it is definitely an important book or work that Dr. Amos N. Wilson left behind us, our ancestor who transitioned in 1995. He was only 54 years old when he transitioned. We think about how young he was. This is someone who could still be with us today. So, it's kind of mysterious. It's always mysterious to me when we have such great leaders who die at a young age. Kwame Ture is another one who died. I think he was 57 when he transitioned, I should say. And he, transitioned. He passed away from cancer. But he always remained sort of skeptical about how he got cancer, and that's for the podcast. But this particular discussion, again, we're going to go into this book. Those people who are viewing now, going to be viewing later, I want to appreciate you, first of all, for being a part of this discussion. Make sure that you go out and purchase the book, Blueprint for Black Power. This is a book that should be in every Black person's household. You can see it's a pretty thick book. So I'm probably going to be going through this for months, probably over a year. But the intention of me doing this and going through this at the pace that I am is so that our community can be more aware of this book and to like really be inspired to read it and want to get and for all ages too. Like I want the youth to be able to resonate with what I'm saying and the pace that I'm going, where a lot of this information sometimes it goes over my head if I'm reading too fast and not sitting and really examining and really pondering on what Dr. Wilson is trying to convey. So this is meant for people at different levels of consciousness. Wherever you are, hopefully you can get something out of these discussions. So with that being said, let me get into the text. I'm on page 6. And this is the 5th paragraph I'm going into. I might do 2 paragraphs. Let's see how it goes. So I'm on page 6, and I'm starting with the 2nd paragraph on page 6. We deny ubiquity of power to our peril. It does not vanish from reality or lose its influence by our refusal to acknowledge its existence. Therefore, we are behooved to recognize and make use it to goodness. Power in and of itself can be both a detrimental and a beneficial aspect of social relationships, and can be made to play the negative as well as the positive role. In the constitution of human social life, power can be utilized to achieve personal, social, political, and material ends if it is appropriately developed, organized, and applied. The question of whether power is beneficial or harmful can only be answered in regard to the specific use to which it is put in a particular situation. All right, so I wrote down some notes in regards to that particular paragraph, and some of the things that came to mind: whether we engage in a power struggle or not, power is going to be exercised against us and has been exercised historically against us. And so we are in a power struggle as African people. And many of us, the masses, are not engaged in the struggle, but there's always been people within our movement who has been bringing the contradictions within the colonial society to our have been bringing it to our awareness. And so whether we want to engage in this, is what Dr. Amos N. Wilson is getting at. Uh, it's still, the struggle and the conflict is still going to be there regardless or not. Those people who are in positions of power are looking to maintain their position, and they're using power against us, different methods of power to make sure that they are able to maintain that position. And so what Dr. Amos N. Wilson is sort of uplifting is understanding the different methods that are used against us and being able to use those methods to attain power ourselves. And when we're in a position of power, it doesn't necessarily mean that there has to be a physical war or conflict that takes place. There's different methods that can be used to attain power and using power. So influence, for instance, coercion, the manipulation of a people to make them think that you have more power than you have. That's a strategy or a method of power that is used at times. And so we have to be very skilled in these different methods. Now, just to use an example of how power can be used to defend and protect, and also to keep people from oppressing or exploiting you. Let's look at the Russian and the United States, and I'm gonna give two examples of how a country or a state responds based off of the perceived power that you may have. So the Cold War was a struggle between two superpowers, the Soviet Union and the United States. And the United States didn't engage in the Soviet Union, despite the Soviet Union's support of socialist communist governments around the world that was undermining the expansion of Western European and United States power. And so this struggle that was happening between the Soviet bloc and the West, two different ideological struggle that was taking place between the communist section or areas of the world and the colonial capitalist world, didn't turned into proxy wars in which the conflict between the Soviet Union and the United States was taking place in Africa and in Asia, but there wasn't a direct conflict. And the reason why there wasn't a direct conflict is because of the perceived response of the other superpowers. So the United States didn't attack the Soviet Union directly, and the Soviet Union didn't attack the United States directly because of what they thought the response or reaction would be, or which could be what they call mutually assured destruction, right? This nuclear conflict. Now let's take Russia. I just take the United States and Iraq. In the first Gulf War, when the Iraqis invaded Kuwait, little old Kuwait, right? The United States went to war with them along with other countries around the world, right? They responded to Iraq in the way that they responded. They knew Iraq didn't have the same response, or wouldn't have been able to have the same response that a country like the Soviet Union would have. So let's fast forward to the contemporary, like the current situation in Ukraine. Russia invades Ukraine, and the United States did not respond, or no country responded to Russia the same way they responded to Iraq, is because of the perceived response and reaction that the Soviet Union would have to an attack to a U.S. attack on the Soviet Union. But that's power, is the perception of power that others have of you can protect and defend your interests. And this is what it's about. And that's what Dr. Amos N. Wilson is sort of getting to in this particular paragraph. I'm gonna just read this last part. He said, power can be utilized to achieve personal, social, political, material ends if it is appropriately developed, organized, and applied. The question of whether power is beneficial or harmful can only be answered in regard to the specific use to which it is put in a particular situation, right? So we can't look at power, whether power is negative or positive. It all depends on its use. We can't look at the exercise of power because of imperialist expansion or colonialism, which is an abuse of power. Uh, that's the misuse of power. The use of power can be used for positive gains and positive objectives. And as African people or people who are colonized, it is not about emulating the European in the way that were able to attain power. It's about African people exercising power for self-determination, to be able to liberate ourselves from the current situation that we are in as African and Black people. So with that being said, I'm gonna just stop at that paragraph. I'll leave the other paragraph for the next time that we have this study. And again, as always, appreciate everybody for tuning in. And there's other ways that you can support us, and that's by subscribing or visiting our website, wechargecolonialism.org, reading our articles. As a grassroots think tank, our objective or mission is to put out information to combat the colonial propaganda, the colonial media that's controlled by the colonizers, the ones who are against the interests of African self-determination and liberation. So with that being said, again, peace and power. Until next time, keep revolution on your brain. Uhuru.